From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Night Show, inviting you to join Nolan as guest this week, the legendary Brendan Kirby, to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another edition of the show. Join me this week is a legendary person. Before I get to my introduction for this person, why they are on here today, I just want to say hopefully you've enjoyed last week's episode and hopefully you enjoyed this episode as well. And I'll continue with that frivolity at the end. But now, for the main reason you're here, because of course you're not here for me, you're here for my guest. Not only is he the jester of jokes, the Earl of East Bay, a spark of electricity in the often gloom daily view of television news, he's the host with the most and an overall great guy. May also see my guest movie star-esque smile Monday through Friday on the Rhode Show only on WPRI 12. I am both honored and pleased to be joined by the distinguished Brendan Kirby, co-author of Seinfeld, the official cookbook, which came out in October right here. Good sir, thank you for taking the time to come on.
Well, it's my pleasure, Nolan. I just had to come on here to tell you I can't stay. I'll see you later, buddy. How do I follow that lovely introduction? Thank you very much.
Of course. Well, when I start this journey 2 years ago, and now I'll get into it further, the details, always, you're researching, you're looking to see what can I do, how does this work, how does this look, how should I do this properly? And of course, I came across clips from your old days as the host of Wicked Late, and I said, this man's got under control, even if it was all those years ago, and here we are.
And despite seeing those clips of me on Wicked Late, you still decided to invite me on. Thank you. God bless you.
Yes. Well, of course, and also for your love of if not the dean, one of the two deans of late night talk show, which is Dave Letterman, of course, and one of the greatest shows of all time, Seinfeld. I want to start with this. Although you've had a busy last few months, you just had the telethon with Meeting Street the other day. The book just came out a few months ago, and Drew Barrymore, your interview with her was recent. You're a busy man. For you, in your situation with the Rhode Show, what's it like to have the opportunity now to sort of go back to what it was like in 2019 without the craziness and the gloom that was COVID overhanging on the operations of something like the Rhode Show?
Definitely. It's so much better getting back to some sense of normalcy. I mean, I will tell you, it's very cool that you and I can connect like this, which I love. I can be on your show here from the comfort of the Kirby Castle, as I call it. But at the same time, there's nothing like that true in-person energy. Sure. When you have the guests there, you can work off of them. Something fun might happen within the live moment, and you've got the person right there. Plus, I'm old school, Nolan. I never thought I'd say those words, but now that I get a little older, I kind of appreciate more kind of where I came from within my broadcasting career, so to speak. When I was coming up, I loved the talk shows, like you said, and there was always a palpable energy when the guests would come out, and there was an energy between host and guest or whomever was on or whatever was happening in the moment. And we really lost a lot of that through this kind of situation. So it's great to be back to that. However, I will say that this kind of opens the door to something, like I said, that we're doing right here, which is great because it allows us to connect. And also, we were forced, all the shows really were, to really show or to really figure out a way to circumnavigate the thing that we were all in, the circumstances, the hand that we had been collectively dealt. So I will say that from that perspective, it did open the door in terms of making some connections with people in different parts of the world that, theretofore we may not have been able to have made because of, we're a live in studio show. We don't do things that make the show look like a college project or something like that. But from that perspective, it was nice to make some connections. But overall, I'm very relieved to be back to the standard kind of in-person live. We've got the green room there at the Rhode Show. The guests come in. There's an excitement about it that I still love. But at the same time, we still do a Zoom every once in a while if it means we can get somebody great. But that's a great question. It's so nice to be back to the in-person stuff. And that really is kind of what the Rhode Show is all about, that great energy in the morning.
This time, the last 2 years, although we've discovered other things about the general population that sort of split down the middle. But on another note, we learn about ourselves individually, things that we might not have known prior. So for Brendan Kirby, the last 2 years, what has he learned about himself that he didn't know prior to the last 3 years?
Well, I didn't learn anything. It just reaffirmed that I'm a very weak man, Nolan. I don't like when my routine is uprooted. I don't like when things are changed. But all kidding aside, it really did prove that I could adapt, that we all could. I got the ring light on me. It's like a police interrogation in my living room all of a sudden. But it did prove, Nolan, that, what, we all do kind of have the ability to adapt a little bit. And when faced with circumstances that are challenging, I was going to say dire. They weren't dire. They were challenging in hindsight.
Sure.
But when faced with those things, I think it proves that, hey, we actually, and in my case, it proved that, we can still do great work. I remember, like, we were doing so many different things. The Rhode Show, like I alluded to in your first question, is a guest driven, for the most part, talk show. So when you remove that element, you're losing, the core of really what it is and what makes it unique and awesome. So I will say, when I first realized what we were up against, I thought, well, how can we do this? And the show is an hour every morning, live from 9 to 10 on WPRI, which is great. But without guests coming in, we went down to a half an hour. Only two hosts at a time were in the studio. But I will say, you mentioned like my comedy background and stuff like that. I always wanted to be a writer. So I have that in me. I'm always thinking of ideas and working on new concepts and things like that, mostly from a comedic or, joke perspective. So from an entertainment standpoint perspective. So it really allowed me to kind of think, okay, well, what could we do here that we couldn't do before? How could this maybe open a door into something that no one's really had to do? So I'm really proud of some of the bits and things that I was able to come up with during that time too.
I mentioned before, and you sort of talked about comedy background and your interest and love for Letterman, and you ended up, of course, interning with him many years ago. And then you had you have a wonderful story of making a joke on his at his expense in an elevator, which I'll ask you later. But for you, though, I mean, this world, your interview type of based show, you're talking with guests. That's a certain aspect and mindset one has to have, and to have thought about it as a young age, it's a whole nother concept. So for you, growing up, your first inclination or decision, in the sense of, oh wow, I like this, I'm connecting to this on some point, so maybe try to get something out of it professionally.
Well, yeah, I didn't have a date until I was about 35, so I had nothing but free time, Nolan. So when I was in high school, I became so enamored with talk shows. I loved Seinfeld, obviously, the book, we'll talk about that and whatnot, but I was just so drawn to comedy. And even before I knew what Seinfeld was, or before I knew what Letterman was, or any of those shows which became my favorites, long before I knew what those things were, there was nothing I loved more than just laughing with my friends.
Sure.
I wasn't disruptive in class, but we liked laughing.
Sure.
Funny things would happen. Like, look at what the teacher, picking up on some idiosyncrasy that the teacher did, and then trying to imitate it later or something like that. Nothing malicious, just enjoying the simple humor in everyday situations. And then later, when I started to realize there were shows out there which kind of tapped right into that interest that I already had, then it was like, okay, now, everything is up for grabs now. I realized, oh my goodness, like, there's stuff out there that is silly that I love, and people are making a living at this. And even though I had those comedic, inclinations, and I was interested in all things comedy at an early age, I never really thought that I would pursue anything in front of the camera like that, because I just was very shy. Even though I would laugh with my friends and joke around a lot, I very rarely would open my mouth during high school. I just didn't have a lot of confidence yet, but I knew I really liked comedy. I would have all these ideas in my head, and I just didn't have the confidence to get them out. And then once I got to college, I went to Rhode Island College. I went to Rick, go Anchorman. I just started to come out of that shell a little bit. And I realized, I think I want to pursue a broadcasting career. And I love sports. I love basketball. And I wanted to be like an announcer. I thought, well, I love playing sports, but I'm never going to make it as a pro. Maybe I could call the games. You get a good seat. You get to be right there. And I like the energy surrounding live sporting events. But as much as I loved sports, I realized I don't think I want to make that my career. I want to be able to enjoy that and not have it be my work. And then I thought, well, maybe I could somehow work on one of these shows that I love. And then when I was at Rick, I applied for the Letterman internship, because that really was my favorite show, along with Seinfeld. And I thought maybe I could get a job there. And I applied and I got it. And it was the highlight of, it's still one of the greatest highlights I've ever had. And from that experience, I kind of knew that I wanted to work around some kind of talk show environment. I wanted to work at that show. I wanted to be a writer there. But in the back of my mind, I thought I want to be in front of the camera somehow.
Sure.
But this is 20 years ago now, which seems impossible. It
Yeah.
was the spring of 2003. That time there was no, YouTube yet or TikTok or any of
Sure.
those things, Instagram or like this where you can do your own thing.
Yeah.
So it was like, how am I going to somehow find a way to make a career out of that? And there was no way, Nolan, I was going to be on the
Sure.
news. I just, that doesn't align with my personality at all. I have great respect for people who
Sure.
do that, but it's not who I am. So I didn't want to call sports. I didn't want to report on sports or do the weather or news or anything like that. So it was challenging, but I knew if I kept working at it, maybe something, would find its way to me. And then the Rhode Show started, and I'm like, well, that would be a cool opportunity. And at that point, I was already doing the public access thing, the Wicked late night program, which was great. And the reason I did that was just because I love broadcasting and I love entertaining, kind of like what you're doing here. You have a passion for something, you go after it. And I kind of thought, okay, I started Wicked Late in 2003 after I got back from Letterman. And I thought, well, either way, I'm going to have a show somehow. Well, I was working full time at the same time, which was great. But I thought somehow I'm going to get this thing out of me, which has to get out, being in front of the camera, joking, being silly, interviewing guests, creating moments. And I thought that way, if and when the time is right, I will have created this experience for myself that will put me in a pretty good position where I'm ready for that next opportunity. And in this case, it was for the Rhode Show, which came along. And I'm really happy that it did, because it's a nice outlet for someone like me who doesn't want to be too serious, when he has to be. Some of my best work is when we have people on the show who are going through something difficult. But for the most part, it's fun. So kind of through that circuitous route is how I arrived at this. And I just always had that love of talk shows and of comedy.
I want to ask, sort of talk about your experiences with Letterman and that whole process. And, growing up, you're watching the show. And of course, you might have came a little after the rise of Johnny Carson. And then when it ends, and then Letterman, as Johnny has said, and it's been known that was supposed to be his successor, ends up being Leno, of course. For you growing up, I mean, how aware were you of that stuff compared to nowadays in television, where you know of the background stuff, of the hostility or the weird moments of that? Were you someone who took sides that as a kid, or were you not aware of that situation that they had?
Well, I was very aware, because I fully immersed myself in all things late night TV. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I remember taking that book, The Late Shift, out of the library because I wanted to know everything that had happened. Because I got into late night TV kind of like in the middle 90s, and my mother had liked Johnny Carson, and she liked when Jay Leno filled in. She liked Letterman too, because he was on after Carson, but she just enjoyed all that stuff. And so by the time I kind of arrived at watching the late night talk shows, it was Leno and Letterman. And I think that Jay Leno is great, actually. I just always preferred Dave's style. That's why I gravitated more towards him. All these guys are supremely talented. But yeah, so I was kind of learning about all the shows, and my mom's like, oh, Johnny Carson used to come on before. And I was like, well, who's that? And then I needed to learn all about everything. So I was well versed in all of that, and I a real student of it. I tried to read as many articles about it as I could. Like I said, it was pre-YouTube. Now you can go back and watch clips of anything. And I try not to watch too much of that stuff because I'm working on my own things and whatnot, but at the same time, it's all there. But at the time when I was like in my teenage years, I was, like I said, going to the library, trying to get every book about it I could, find old recordings anywhere I could. There used to be the Museum of Television and Radio in New York. It's now the Paley Center, but you could actually go there and pull out old episodes of The Tonight Show or Letterman or whatever, SNL, things like that, and watch them. And I used to do that anytime I went to New York. And I really tried to watch every interview I could with any of those guys. So I had a very strong knowledge of what was happening. And you know what, Nolan? That's probably my first kind of entry into the business of it all. You become something inspires you and you want to pursue a career in it, and you're drawn to it, but then you start to realize, there's all these hidden layers to it, and you realize there's more to it than what you see. And I don't want to say it removes all of the joy, but it kind of puts it into perspective a little bit. And I didn't unwittingly at the time, I'm learning about business. It wasn't really applicable to me in the moment, but now in hindsight, looking back, I really was gleaning all of this stuff from it, which had to do with the business end of it, which was fascinating and is still interesting to me to this day. So yeah, I was aware of all that stuff.
With these guests that people have, they obviously there's a sidekick, Dave had Paul Schaefer, and then he had Calvert for a little bit. He was when he come in frequently. Jimmy Kimmel, no, yeah, Jimmy Kimmel has Guillermo, Johnny Carson, Ed McMahon, and sometimes Doc Severinsen. The list goes on. Conan had Andy Richter. The point I'm trying to get is that there was a symbiotic relationship between them. Neither would interrupt each other, but also with Dave wouldn't interrupt the guest. Unlike others you see nowadays, I think Fallon, is maybe a good example of someone who maybe doesn't just sit and let the person talk. Conan was a good option of just letting them talk. You see with unlike with guests like Robin Williams, you just let him go and that's just sit back and relax. But with Dave, it seemed as though he sat and listened regardless of who the guest was. With your own show, I mean, compared to both, I mean, it is, and I ask about what you admire about the guy. Is that another thing that you think set him apart from others where he just sits, asks his questions, personal or, typical questions, and just let them speak and then ask another question?
Yeah, I always thought that was his greatest strength, obviously, was his interviewing ability. Yeah, Letterman is hilarious, but he's a great communicator. He's a broadcaster first, I think. He's hilarious, and he started as a great stand-up, but broadcasting was more of his thing, I think. And the comedic persona kind of came out through that, whereas Jay Leno is a stand-up comedian first, and I think it was kind of evident. I think Dave really excelled at the interviews. I think he really could showcase his knowledge and also his quick-witted, the quickness of his words and the sharpness of them. I was always drawn toward that. I love words and I love vocabulary and that type of thing. So that always drew me to him. And he was just a great interview and so many different interests. He could talk to people about anything. And that's another thing I really liked. I thought, yeah, wow, like he can really get in there and talk to people about anything, whether it's an athlete or an actor or an author or a political figure or a historian, whatever it might be. He's very well-rounded in that regard, and I always thought his best strength was his interviewing style. So yeah.
Well, and that similar to that, the guests. I mean, they're classic guests that he's had on. Robin Williams, Norm Macdonald, Martin Short's one, Bill Murray, Steve Martin. The list goes on and on. And I remember, and it's not just the first time it's been mentioned, but years ago, and it's since then. There's a story of the late great Norm Macdonald, probably one of the greatest comedians out there, one of the greatest Dave guests of all time, where when he was getting started in the early 90s, he wanted to get on the Carson show and was told by whoever it was, the talent person, that he wasn't a Johnny comedian. He was a Letterman type of comedian. And I'm sure that breaks your heart because Carson was the dean of the shows. For you to watch that as a young person and learn from that and see him just tear it up with Norm, with Robin, with the others I mentioned. How do you assess that from your own comedic abilities in mind, but also as someone who's experienced the talk show format? Was there somebody that, on top of that you enjoyed the most on Dave's show as a guest?
Yeah, I loved. Speaking of Norm Macdonald, I was such a huge fan of Norm's. Norm came to do stand-up in Newport, and he came to this area all the time, but I went to his show in 2009 in Newport, and I introduced myself to him after the show, and at the time I was doing Wicked Late, and I gave him my business card, and I said, and he goes, you're the host, I love Norm. And I said, yeah, like I have this local show. I said, you're welcome to come on at any time. If you come back, I'm exaggerating here for alleged comedic effect, but he was awesome and so nice. And I remember saying to him, I told him how much I enjoyed his stand-up that night. And I remember saying to him, this is 2009. I said, one of my favorite late night talk show segments ever is you on Letterman telling that Scrabble story. Nolan, do you know the Scrabble story?
Where I think you'd have to repeat, but I remember seeing it on YouTube.
Yes, he is telling Letterman about his trip to Canada. Hey, I went this, and he stays at an inn, like a bed and breakfast, and the innkeeper wants to play Scrabble with him. It is fantastic, and I'm sure the nerds who love TV broadcasting, comedy, and Norm Macdonald and Letterman who are hearing this already know about it. But it's one of my favorite things ever. So he was one of my favorite guests. Tom Hanks with Letterman was always awesome. He would always be terrific. Steve Martin, I believe you mentioned Martin Short. Those, Howard Stern, I'm a huge fan of his. They would always be great with him because they're entertainers at their core, and you could really see. I think Letterman has said that when like a Robin Williams or one of these people would be on, it would be like a night off for him,
Sure, yeah.
because these people are coming on and they know what to do and they are there to perform. And Tina Fey was another one. She was
Sure.
always great with Letterman. Like, she's so creative and funny and one of my favorites. So I did take note of things like that. And then there are the nights for any talk show host, or the days for anybody who's just, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, how much time is left? This is
Yeah.
going nowhere. You can feel like
Sure.
it's not even moving, the
Yeah.
clock, but you become aware of what's great, what's not, what's interminable, and what just flies by.
Sure.
And I'm sure the former applies for you right now with me.
Oh, no, never. Although I think I better get on my game and stay focused, or else I'll make myself look like a fool. At what point during your time watching that show did you get the inkling of, or interest, and then saying, screw it, I'm going to do it, to say, that's where I want to be, that's what I want to do? Do you remember that moment when you said that, or is it just sort of a combustion of many memories?
Yeah, it's that. It was a gradual process. I just, like I said, I'll say anything for cheap laugh, but I was very socially reticent. I was not very outgoing during my high school and college years. So I gravitated toward the talk shows. I was in comedy was the thing that got me excited, and music as well to a certain degree. But even though I love playing guitar, I felt I had more of a talent, if you will, for comedy. I felt I had it. I knew I wasn't arrogant or ignorant enough to think I was as good as some of these people I loved, but I had a seed of something in me that loved that. And as the time wore on, I thought, well, maybe I could somehow find a way to make my career this. Even if it's not at that level, how could I somehow make TV shows, or make, now you're a content creator, but like, how could I generate material or come up with ideas and produce them to earn a living? And so somewhere along the way, I just thought, I want to work in an environment like that, that's creative and maybe even fun, where I can get my ideas out and have some type of an outlet for them. So, but I had all these ideas, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I wanted to be in front of the camera. But I think everyone kind of thought, well, he's so quiet, he never says anything. But I had something, germinating in here, and I knew I could do it. And then in college, in a lot of those communications classes, when I had to get up or to give a speech or something, I became a lot more comfortable speaking and in front of everyone. I'm not going to say it was easy, but it came more naturally. I realized I didn't have a problem getting up in front of everyone and doing that. Yeah, I would be nervous because I just wanted it to go well, but getting up there wasn't an issue. And I remember, like, when I would have to do, get up there and do a presentation or whatever, I would start, just for my own enjoyment, just dropping in jokes, because I thought I have this writing ability. And then I would get like a little laugh or something. And I was like, I know that I'm kind of onto something. And then I would like practice writing the top tens. I would watch Letterman, or if I had taped it the night before, the next morning or the next day, I'd go to watch it. And when he got up to the top 10, I'd pause it and I'd write the category, and I would try to come up with my own jokes. And then I would watch it, and invariably, many times, something I thought of would be in the list. And I thought, see, that proves I'm on the right track. I can be a writer. I've got something here to offer in terms of entertainment. So that kind of reaffirmed to me. And then I started like opening up the newspaper every day. And then, obviously this was during the internet age as well, going to, news websites and seeing what was going on and coming up with monologue jokes, and then writing, and then tuning into Jay or Dave that night, or Conan, whom I love as well, to see if they had a similar take as I did, or to see if I was on the right track. And many times a joke I thought of would be in there, and there was no Twitter yet. There was no way for me to get it out, but it let me, it opened my eyes and made me realize that I kind of have an ability to do this. So it was kind of a gradual process to watching the shows.
Even though, the semester you spent in New York for the Letterman show is 6 months or 5 months, or however long it was for you, that time goes by fast, but also in some situations it may go slow, like anything else in life. For you to balance living in Manhattan for the show, working on the show, then bouncing, other school responsibilities you might have had, how did you find that? And was that something that you were easily able to do, or was that something where you learned during the process?
Well, I earned money on the side stripping at Flash Dancers.
There you
So
go.
it went out very well,
Yeah, the red light district.
I've still got the body for it.
There you
That's right.
go.
If the Rhode Show thing doesn't work out.
Yeah.
No, it was a lot to balance, Nolan. It was I actually would have graduated in this. I was actually just thinking about this the other day, probably because it's 20 years ago. I would have graduated in that spring of '03, but I actually finished up in the fall because I was living in New York for the semester, and it was all worth it, obviously, getting that real world experience on this great show. But yeah, it was a lot to balance, and it was very intimidating. Also, I remember like not even being able to sleep the night before the first day, much like last night, knowing I was coming on here with you.
Thank you.
And just being excited and being afraid that I wasn't going to know how to get there or I was going to be late or something. And it was just a lot of excitement. And then, I didn't want to screw up anything. I didn't want to do the wrong thing. And I'm very fortunate that my parents brought me up to be hardworking and respectful. I'm very lucky. They both very hardworking, and I understand respect. I always had jobs. I know what it means to be on time and to care about your work and to be cordial and to be polite and to respect everyone. And so from that perspective, I knew I would be fine there.
Yeah.
It's just I was so nervous because I was working for my favorite show and I just wanted it to go well. I talked earlier about getting up in front of people, being nervous just because you want things to be great. Now you do come to realize as time goes on that not everything's going to work out well. However, as you get a little older and have some more experience, you learn that sometimes when it doesn't work out, it's even better because you can turn it into something else. But yeah, it was a lot to juggle. It was a lot to balance. But man, I learned so much. And I try to instill in our interns at the Rhode Show, ask questions. I'm here to help you. I'm now a resource for you. I try to encourage anyone who's young to get out there to do their own thing. I mean, now that everyone's got a phone, you can just have your own show. Go do it. Go make it happen and just use whatever opportunities in front of you. In this case, it was working for that show. Use it to your advantage. So yeah, to answer your question, because I have a tendency to go on these tangents and get off track because I love talking. It was a lot to balance and a lot to do, but I tried to make the most of the experience and to learn as much as I could.
Sure. You shared a story, I think it was with on carpooling with Ben a while ago, where you talked about how you gave some of your material to Leno to look over and see if he could have any areas where you can improve or do better, whatever the case may be, and then hopefully get something there, and then trying to get onto his show. And then of course Fallon takes over. Was there any moment during your internship that, I'm sure you were writing, of course, things that were funny. Was there any moment where you said, what if I pass this along to somebody to get to Dave? Did you ever think that? Or were you just someone who's like, holy shit, this person's God to me. This person's too high up to do it. Because at the time, Jay was still doing comedy on the side. Was there a moment for you where you thought maybe I'll pass this along to somebody that works with Dave, or were you just too scared to do that?
Pretty well, yes and no. That's a great question. I did realize there at 21 years old, all those years ago, that, okay, I need to take advantage of this opportunity, but you also want to be respectful of their work environment. You are an intern, you're there to do a job, but you are also there to learn, and the staff was there to be a resource to you in a respect, as long as you respected the role you had and their role. Like, they have a show to put on every day, so their number one priority is not helping you. However, there were openings where you did have the opportunity to talk to people, and those are the ones I kind of took advantage of by asking questions. Now, my role as an intern was I had a list of duties, and that's one of the things I loved about the job because it was such a well-organized program. They had stuff for us to do every day, and we were heavily involved in the production of the show. But I was already writing by then. You're correct. So what I did was as time goes on and you get to know people, a lot of the writers were nice enough I would ask them, would you take a look at this handful of jokes? And they were. And so not to get on the air because there are rules about Writers Guild of America and whatever. And I'm only, a lowly intern, 21 years old, but there were openings where I could have them critique my writing. Could you take this notebook and look at what I have here? And they were very helpful in terms of, this is great, this is not, you're onto something here, you're on the right track here. So no, I wasn't going to be like, here, give this to Dave, you can use it tonight in the monologue. Like, no, that's not happening. But you could still take full advantage of where you were and what you had access to in a professional manner if done the right way. And that's what I did. I just had to read stuff, circle the good ones, stick with this is a good idea. So from that perspective, I was able to get a lot of feedback and to really use it to help me. And you look back when you were 20, my writing has come so far.
Sure,
Back then,
of
it was
course.
so derivative. It was so, I wanted to be like these people that I love. But now that I've had more life experience, now my writing is so much better because it's from here, and it's
Sure.
it's everything's inspired by something, because something's got to get you locked in. But now it's so much more
Sure.
me with the dash of all the things I love. That's what I think makes it unique and fun. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I kind of took something away from that.
You're interning with Dave. That goes well. That goes great. You completed all that stuff. Then you get the idea to host your own show on public access, Wicked Late with Brendan Kirby. I recommend all those out there who have YouTube or can somehow function internet. Check it out on YouTube because you'll really enjoy it, especially
No, you won't.
from the Rhode
That's a
Island area.
fallacy. It's a bold-faced lie.
Maybe I just enjoy it then. Nevertheless, point being, people in that realm, comedy, you have to have a lot of stones to do it and say, I can do this, and I'm gonna risk my ego and just go out there and do this. But on top of it, to do your own show, if you're not a stand-up comedian and you're successful touring around the world like a Jay Leno, a Dave Letterman, a Johnny Carson, who have this credentials to them to be able to get this name recognition and audience right away, or Joe Rogan, who can be a comedian and get all the success as a podcaster. When you're starting out, your viewpoint, what was your viewpoint and idea and acceptance in terms of how you would have to begin and climb up the mountain that was your talk show?
Well, I knew if I wanted to have a career in front of the camera somehow that wasn't in the adult film industry, I would have to somehow create, and that didn't work out. It's a shame. No one should look up those tapes. But I knew that I was somehow going to have to practice at it. I love stand-up comedy, Nolan. I've done some of it. I've hosted a lot of things and performed live, but I didn't want my life to be that of a stand-up comedian. So I knew I wanted to do something in front of the camera that was comedic from some kind of broadcasting perspective.
Sure.
So I thought, okay, like I told you earlier, there was no Rhode Show yet. There was nothing out there that would, I'm not just going to walk in and get a network late night show at 21. Like you got to figure something out. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to create my own experience. And I told you, now everyone has a phone. There's more opportunity. You can create a YouTube channel, whatever you want to do. But back then it was like, well, how do I do this? And the public access studio was right up the street. And like, you telling me anyone can do a show? Even you, Brendan? Yes. So I just walked up there and I wrote some of my friends, blackmailed many of them into helping me out. And I said, guys, do you want to do this with me? Like, I need a crew. I need some people to help out. And they were all on board. I mean, we were all 21 at the time, 22, and you've got nothing but time back then, when you're that age. And so once a month, everyone would schlep over to Bristol, which is where the studio was. And I would write the whole show and we would produce it together, and I would book a guest, and I just wanted Nolan to be in front of the camera performing some kind of a talk show with a comedic slant, traditional monologue, but with my jokes, things I thought were funny, ideas I would have, just silly things. I wanted an outlet for it, and I wanted to learn the ins and outs of broadcasting so that, and again, I already had a pretty strong knowledge because I'd already been at Letterman. I already taken many classes. I had actually interned at WPRI 12 in the sports department. So I'd been around television production enough to know how it all worked. But I wanted to have some samples of my work where it's me performing my own original material, interviewing guests, producing segments. So that way I would be a more well-rounded, not just performer, but just television producer. It would prove to whomever later on that I already know how to do this. And in the case for me, it was the Rhode Show. They knew that I knew what I was doing. I wasn't just someone off the street. Not to say that, broadcasting is such a weird field. Sometimes somebody does walk in right off the street and get an opportunity, but I wanted to at least be polished enough that I was ready for that chance. So the Wicked Late experience was just, I wanted to do a show. I wanted to practice. I wanted to get better. I wanted to hustle. I wanted to use it as some kind of like a professional fulcrum to meet the media people that later I would be working with. It was an entryway to reach out the way you reached out to me, to get to know somebody, to book them, do a nice interview, make sure you're prepared and ready to go so that they remember that it was good. Because, public access has I don't even know if anyone does shows there anymore, but at the time it was, okay, if someone's just going to throw a camera up, and they had a preconceived reputation as being kind of, laughable. You just kind of make fun of it. But I wanted to make sure that we were a step above that. Yeah, like the set, it looked the way it looked because that's what it was. But I was putting a lot of time and effort into writing and producing and making it polished so that if someone took the time to look in on it, they would say, wow, that's actually he's not just setting up a camera talking and thinking he's a show. He's really writing it and putting a lot of effort in to make it something enjoyable that's, like I said, polished. And yeah, like where he is not seen by, a network sized audience, but it's still really good. And I'm very proud of the work that I did there because I was doing it. Yes, my friends came and helped, but I was producing the whole thing by myself. So that was the goal. Get some FaceTime in front of the camera, practice, get better, and learn all the elements. So there's no way that you won't be ready if and when the opportunity comes later. And it did.
Doing this show, I've sort of taken from the legendary Brendan Kirby, the dean and hero of Southern Rhode Island talk shows. But people such as Barbara Walters, Larry King, and Charlie Rose, James Lipton, Tom Snyder, Mike Wallace, and people of that nature who have a high quality, I think, of interview skills and ability to host a program and show that this is why they're getting paid all that money to live in California or in New York. Besides Letterman being your hero, were there any other places or people that you sort of were borrowing things from, or not? I don't want to say copying verbatim, but using them as examples to incorporate into your own show besides Letterman?
Yeah, there's so many people I love. And I was talking to someone about this the other day. I really think that I'm like an amalgamation of all these things that I love, be it Seinfeld, Letterman, Conan, I think is brilliant. I love him. I love Howard Stern, who I mentioned, Larry David, of course, the Seinfeld connection there. I love all these people so much. I loved SNL. I love David Spade. I think that the Dana Carvey David Spade podcast is awesome. Yeah. I'm just drawn to anybody who's silly, and the more nonsensical, the better. And like I said, I always like to stress that when I was in school, before I knew what any of these shows were, that I was already just in love with laughing and comedy and just silliness. And then when I started to see these people doing it, I just was like, I love all of these things. I just want to be around that type of nonsense. And that's kind of what it is for me. And I really love anything that's creative and polished. I hate just stuff that sucks.
Yeah.
There's so much going on now, and there are so many people creating things. Some of it's just like that. I like a unique take, an original take. Now I know it's hard to be. So much of it's already been said, and I just like stuff that you can tell someone's put a lot of work into. I like a nice polished product where someone's really put the time and the energy in, and you can tell they believe in the idea. One of the things I learned from Don Rickles, you mentioned him earlier. He, I think, was the best at committing to a joke because, as funny as he was, there were times where he would unleash something in and it wouldn't get a laugh, but he was committed to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of something I learned from him in terms of those appearances. And that's how you have to be. You have to be committed to what you say. And even tonight with you, I'm sure I've said something that makes no sense. And even when I'm on the Rhode Show, I was in a cooking segment today with the guy. The guy was great, and it finished. I'm like, what did I say? I don't know. But you just have to be in the moment and commit to it and trust the instinct. So all of those people that I mentioned, I thought were great. And, the Seinfeld thing and all that. And all those people just made me want to pursue some kind of silliness for a living. And I just admire anyone who's really made something of themselves within that kind of format.
People like Dave, and I believe Dave, with his show, he sort of just dropped it on people who said, oh yeah, I'm going to be retiring probably at the end of the year. Johnny Carson was retiring at the end of the year. They sort of knew that their time was coming to an end and that they didn't want to stay longer than the music stopped.
Yeah.
For you with your show, before it got too stale, although it probably never got stale, for you, when
Episode
did you
1.
that first joke you told right when you walked out, I'm guessing. When you were doing it, and you did it for so many years, longer than some people who are doing it for money on TV these days. When did you realize, okay, this has reached its peak? This has reached the moment where it's saying, okay, this is enough. This is where I've put enough effort in it. Now I'm ready to say bye bye to it.
Well, first of all, Nolan, for something to become stale, it has to be fresh in the first place. I was never. No, the only reason I stopped doing that show was because concurrently at that time, I was like, I could only do one a month because I had a full-time job at the
Sure.
time. And producing and creating a television show is a lot of work.
Sure.
And so, and it's not that I didn't like it. It just, you don't always have the time. So I was working at the same time and doing the show every month, and it would repeat 4 times. It would repeat every Sunday night. And I just kind of thought, I was maybe like 30 by the end of it. And I'm like, well, this is like, I'm spinning my wheels now. If I'm ever going to take a swing at making some type of talk show hosting, writing, performing, comedy thing my job, I probably have to leave Rhode Island.
Sure.
And that's hard because where are you based out of? Where do you live?
Rhode Island.
You're here. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love it here, and
Sure.
I love that my career is here. But at that time, I was thinking to myself, I'm never going to know if there's something else unless I just go for it. So
Yeah.
I realized in 2012, I guess the show had been on for 8.5 years, and we had been every month of my life kind of revolved around that show, which I liked. But I realized there's really no more I can do. I'm spinning
Sure.
my wheels now, and I had saved up some money through my job, and I thought I'm just going to move out to LA, see what I can find, look up some contacts, and I did. So we had the last show in like July of 2012, and it was really good actually.
Sure.
And, I'm very proud of it. But I just moved out to LA without anything, and I just found an apartment, and I worked a lot of contacts. I worked behind the scenes. And I just felt like I needed to try that because in the back of my mind, it was, well, nothing's happening here anyway. You might as well try something else. And honestly, I'm glad I did, Nolan, because if I had never moved out there, I had been out there for like 1.5 years. Didn't hate it, didn't love it, but I wasn't really, the rubber wasn't gripping the road as I wanted it to.
Sure.
I was missing home. And that's part of the reason it took me so long to go is because my family is here, friends are here. I'd already established a life and social circle here. So it was tough, but I was missing all that. And I thought, well, the Rhode Show's looking again. And this was in the fall of 2013. So I just sent a video to them. Now, the reason I tell you that is because had I not gone out there, I don't think I would have applied for the Rhode Show because in the back of my mind, I would have been thinking, well, what else is out there? Because I had auditioned for the Rhode Show once prior and I didn't get it. And I thought, well, whatever, like, and you learn along the way, like that doesn't mean anything. Sometimes you're just not what someone's looking for in the moment. Like so many people that we know and love didn't get it the first time they tried for things. So you can't let that deter you at all. But by going out there, for all the reasons I mentioned, I thought, let's just throw the video together. And again, I wouldn't have done that had I not gone. So it's interesting. I had to go all the way to the West Coast to come all the way back. But everyone's story is unique. And that's just the way it goes in this weird business. So I just felt I stopped at the show because I felt like I needed to do something new.
Well, and here you are, a success story in of itself. You talked about going out LA and that, and Joe Frost, her show Family SOS, and I remember.
How did you find that? You've done some extensive research, my friend.
Hey, listen, I don't try to BS anybody. I try my best to be as best as I can. As you can tell, I'm slipping up occasionally from time to time, but I do my work. I may not be Johnny Carson. I may not be Joe Rogan, but I sure make it as entertaining as it is, even if it gets 20 views, 5 views, or whatever it may be.
That's the attitude, because when I was on public access, it didn't matter. I don't care who there's one person or 1 million. You put everything into it. So I love your research. Continue.
Well, you go out, you LA, you come back here to the Rhode Show. that, although it's not like a Letterman or a Wicked Late where it's a late night talk show, it is still a talk show where you're interviewing people, you're doing funny things, you're cracking jokes. How much of an acceptance were you with that in terms of, okay, this might not be what my dream was, but this is close to it, and this may help me get to another point? Was there any sort of conversation with yourself about that?
There really was, because I didn't think I was cut out for the morning. And I knew that my act, whatever you want to call it, my comedic sensibility would have to be adjusted drastically being on at 9 a.m. as opposed to 10:30 or whatever I was doing my other little show, or all these other shows that were on late that I really liked. So I really, and I let, what's interesting is by the time I applied for that, and when I was being interviewed, and when I got the call back and I went in there, I don't want to say intelligent enough, but I was mature enough by that point, in my early 30s, to know you need to tell them that you understand that this is not your rodeo, that you are being hired to be on this show, and that you know the difference between what you've done and what is going to be expected of you in this role. And that maturity came through those years. And that was difficult for me to acquiesce a little bit and to realize, okay, you're not going to be calling the shots here. This is something that is already established, that exists. Whether or not you're there or not, it's a success. That show had already been on for a few years. However, that doesn't mean there's not going to be great opportunities for me to showcase who I am. But early on, I had to be very careful, just out of respect. You're in a new workplace. You're the new person. You want to let everyone know that, hey, you're new here. You got to feel it out. But I will say, I'm quite proud of the fact that here, 9 years into this, I'm going to pat myself in the back a little bit. Like, I've infused that show with a lot of things they weren't doing before I got there, and I've put my stamp on it in a way that is respectful to the morning, and that is respectful to WPRI and the show, which already existed. But I'm really proud of the fact that I've brought a lot of originality to it, and a lot of creative writing. And sometimes I think I'm doing a late night show in the morning, but I'm doing it in a way that's appropriate. And I'm doing it in a way that serves the sponsors and fits the voice and fits the tone of the morning, and that works well with Will, and now Audrey, and previously Michaela, and the people that we do the show with. It fits. And I have found that I can adjust. And every now and then I fire off something that's kind of, a little acerbic or sarcastic, but it's okay, because it fits. Everyone knows me by now. It's okay. And I know where the line is, and I know what's appropriate as a broadcaster. And I mean, I've recycled some Wicked Late bits and done them on the Rhode Show, like in a new way. And I'm proud of that, because they were my ideas, and I always knew that there would be a place for them. But it takes some adjusting, and you have to be respectful of the position, like I said, and it evolves over time. And I'm very, very proud of the work that I've done, that I've been able to infuse it with a lot of my personality. I mean, we're doing cold opens now on the Rhode Show, which is something that I brought to it that I always loved. I felt there was a way we could do cold opens in the morning that would be unique. And I see shows like the third hour of the Today Show or the Talk doing cold opens all the time. And so there is a place for that, and in the morning. And I'm really proud that I brought that to the Rhode Show before even those morning shows were doing it. I'm just proud of what I've brought to it. But you have to adjust, to your point, and realize, okay, it's not what your dream was, but it's a variation of it. You're still getting to go on the air every day. And I'm never happier than when we're on. It's exciting from 9 to 10, and I just really love the excitement surrounding, okay, what are we going to do today? And I like that the canvas is kind of blank, and who knows what's going to happen today. Maybe a moment will today I was talking to this guy from TMZ, and this has never happened. All of a sudden, we're in the boxes like you and I are right here, and all of a sudden I'm in our studio. It went black. It went pitch black. The lights went out. And I was like, well, we've forgotten to pay the electric bill. Like, I love when stuff like that happens, because I can turn it into a moment. That's the comedy in me that's able to, like, think quickly. And I'm not saying I want that stuff to happen, but I love that you never know what's going to happen in that hour. Now we have a moment. I like that. That never gets old.
In a world, or I should say an industry, not just talk shows where you see nationally, where they aren't, oftentimes they're not on occasion. I mean, you won't see a situation like a David Letterman or a Jay Leno or a Johnny Carson ever again. You'll see a short period, I'm sure, because it's different. The landscape, as we said earlier, is completely different. Most people aren't really watching them anymore. But in a news industry, especially in a medium like this, I should say, there's a lot of turnover on a yearly basis. And whether it is someone working in the news industry, sports industry at WPRI 12 or any other station in Rhode Island, or your situation, you have been there for a very long time, nearly a decade. That speaks, I'm sure, not only to your ability, as you said, what you'd be able to bring, but also the trust that the station has in you as well. To be there for as long as you have been, also to have that trust from others saying, okay, we trust you, you know what the hell you're doing. Does that make it even more enjoyable each day when you walk into the office, whether you're feeling great or not?
Yeah, it really does. That's a great point. And something I take great pride in is working with the sponsors. Some of the guests we have on the Rhode Show, they might not be comfortable like we are in front of the camera speaking, but they're working with the show to get their message out there. So those are the moments, aside from the real original comedy and the things that I create that I'm proud of, those are the moments that I'm equally proud of, because that's when I feel I can really rise to the occasion. I feel I have a calming demeanor. I feel that I'm somewhat disarming as a person in front of the camera. I know how to handle any type of guest, and I want the experience to be great. I'll go in there. I'm conscientious. I don't think anyone is as conscientious in his or her work as me. And there are people, but I'm proud of my work. I'm prepared all the time. And that's where I feel I really rise to the occasion. When we have someone who's not totally comfortable, I go in, and Will does this as well, like we all do, and Audrey's learning it. But I'm really proud of those moments where I can go in there, calm the guest a little bit. We're in this together. And when they're done, when I've tossed to break and wrapped up the segment, and they look at me and say, oh, that was so great. That's the victory for me, because I've made it a nice experience for them. They realize it's not that difficult. It's fun. We've gotten their message across. I've made them calm. We've made a nice segment together. It's been an enjoyable experience for them. That's the stuff that really gives me a lot of pride, because it makes them want to work with us again, and it keeps the show rolling. And it's what we're there for, to help someone else shine. And yeah, there's plenty of room for me to shine and be silly, but this is their moment, and I want to make it great for them. So yeah, and that's kind of comes with the comfortability over time. Obviously Cardi's Furniture and Mattresses, Ron and Pete have been at it forever. They know what to do, but the newer businesses coming up that want to work with us, they're not as familiar with that. So you want to help them succeed too. And then once you get to know these different people, then I can kind of pitch an idea to them for something funny that's going to integrate their business in a comedic way on the show, that's going to make it even more memorable. Like, that's the stuff where I take the great victories. Those are where I find the victory.
You talked about and mentioned the things you brought to the show that weren't there before you got there, and you've been here for a while. As we've said, knowing what you're able to accomplish and bring to the table, is there something with your future with the show? Because I'm sure you enjoy being where you are and have no yearning for maybe to do anything else higher or lower to the side. What else are you looking to try to bring or make the show adapt even more as the times go on?
Well, I would like to become a competitive ice dancer. I think I really have it in me. Yeah. Would you like to partner with me, Nolan?
As long as I get lifted up in the air, you get lifted in the air every now and then. That's okay.
I'm too old. You'll have to do the lifting.
Don't worry. I won't get you in the back of my skates if we lose. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm open to everything. I just love creative projects, hence the book, things like that. Yeah. I'm open to opportunities, but the worst day where I am now, because let's face it, you're still going to work. There's going to be challenging days where things aren't going well, or you're at odds with somebody, like whatever. Like, the worst day here still beats the best day doing something that I hate. And I for many years, I had to work in industries that I didn't like. So yeah, I mean, I love doing what I do every day. Where the future takes, I don't know. I don't know what the future of the media business is. Nobody really does. It's changing every day. I like that I'm adaptable. I'm amenable professionally to the changing landscape. I think I've proven I can do, the social stuff. Some of the stuff I do translates very well to Instagram, and I'm proud of that. I think I'm versatile in that regard. I know how to utilize those different platforms, or to leverage something I've done on the show to make it also work across all screens. I don't know what the future of it is, but I'm really open to it all. I want to see where it goes, and I'm not stepping away just yet. I have more I want to do.
The Old Yeller still has some tricks left up the sleeve. Is how they say it.
Old Yeller, don't put me out back yet.
Yeah, no, not yet. Now, I'd be hard pressed to not mention again or talk about during this conversation about one of the big reasons why you're on it, which is the book you co-authored. Whoopsies, it's upside down. Seinfeld,
It's even
the
funnier
official.
when you read it upside
Yeah,
down.
yeah. You'll say, "Oh, well, this is weird. This isn't how the recipe started. Why does it taste like this?" Um, co-authored a book, Seinfeld, the official cookbook. When you're looking for new creative ventures. Of all things in the world you could write about, why Seinfeld and why in a cookbook version?
Yeah, excellent questions. I'm sorry, but we're out of time, right? My good friend Julie Tremaine, with whom I co-authored this book. Julie used to be the editor of Providence Monthly. Great writer. I met her through the Rhode Show. I've probably known her now for almost 10 years. She used to come on the show regularly whenever she would have a new issue out, or she'd be part of our Roadie Roundup panel. She's very witty and very entertaining. We became friends right away. I wrote some stuff for her for Providence Monthly over the years when I had different ideas. And like I said, I love writing. So comedic writing, I'm also pretty good at, just getting words on paper. I enjoy the writing process. So she knew that I loved Seinfeld, and she reached out to me in like November of 2021. And she's like, I gotta talk to you. I said, what's going on? And she goes, I've been approached by a publisher to write a Seinfeld inspired cookbook. And I'm like, what? First of all, how does that not exist already?
Yeah.
There's like a Sopranos one, and there are some other ones. And she goes, do you want to write it with me? And I was like, yeah. I mean, that's some tough things going on in my life at that time. So I needed some time to think about it. But she goes, just think it over, take a week. And I thought, oh my God, I have to do this. It's my favorite show. And I told you earlier, I really, Nolan, do not like doing projects that are derivative too much of something else. Like Seinfeld, this book is doing well because it has the name Seinfeld on it, not because it says Kirby on it. Let's get real. So I'm a little reluctant sometimes about doing projects that are kind of tethered to something that's already popular or derivative of something else, but because I like to create my own things and I'm proud of like the things I come up with. However, I had to break my own rule because I thought, you idiot, this is your favorite show. Stop it. Have some fun with this. It's going to be a blast. It's official. It's licensed by Seinfeld. So Julie said, do you want to do this with me? She knew the show, but not to the extent. She knew I was obsessed with it and what I would always be making the references. So we just got together on it. I sent some samples to the publisher. They liked the work. We struck a deal and started working on it throughout the whole winter of 21 into 22. And by April of last year, we had fired off everything and it was done. And by the summer, I was seeing pictures. It had a release date and it's been out since last fall. And I'm as shocked as you are, but I'm so proud that my name's on it. And I hope I can somehow meet Jerry. I'm working on that because it's licensed by him, because they have to sign off on it, and the publisher got the licensor to sign off on it, which is great. But it gives it some credibility. I mean, you're holding it there. It's a classy book. It's very well done. It's not just some, you see things all the time. It's like, oh, the official like Friends, whatever, and it doesn't have the real logo or anything. And this is legit. And also, I think the recipes are pretty great. We came up with some really funny stuff.
Well, I'm looking forward to cracking into making some stuff. I'm not the best cook. I made a pumpkin pie for the first time a few weeks ago, and like the Rolling Stones song, there was too much brown sugar in it. So we'll crack at this way, and I'm sure my mother will enjoy it as well. Is this an area, writing a book or something like this, something that you have interest in dipping your toes in further, not just maybe writing a regular book, but a comedic type of approach, like Seinfeld type of thing? Is that something that interests you, or is that
my specialty is in erotic fiction?
Oh, there you go.
No, I actually would like, that's another reason I took this, was because I really like writing and I have some other ideas. And now that I've got this one under, on my resume, I do have some other things that I'm going to pursue. Rhode Show's priority number one. It always will be. I want to be ready to entertain every morning. But yeah, now that I've done this and I know what the process is, it was a real learning experience for me. And I'm sorry I didn't have the opportunity earlier, but now that I have it, I love it. And I think this book is a great testament to kind of something I alluded to earlier. Always take advantage of your situation, whether it's an internship, whether like we meet so many people through the Rhode Show. Like I met Julie through that, but by being a polished performer and someone who's conscientious and someone who works hard, like, Julie wouldn't have asked me to do this with her
Sure.
if I wasn't someone of, of substance,
Sure.
who has a high caliber work ethic. And she knew that I did. And so always put your best foot forward, because you never know who you're going to meet through a circumstance that you might want to work with later on. And without this opportunity, there's no book, but also, I brought something to it as well. And all the circumstances kind of led to this, and it's been awesome. And it's pretty wild. So hopefully I could do some more writing. I really enjoy it.
With the books, I mean, you're the co-author, of course, along with Julie. Have you turned into a real life Julia Child or Wolfgang Puck since this book came out?
Oh my God. Yeah, it's so funny when the majority of the people heard I was doing this, they just dumbfounded, what, bemused, perplexed, just blindsided. You in the kitchen, you can't even boil water. And I make jokes on the Rhode Show that I really like the kitchen segments because they're more relaxed, but I'm not a great connoisseur of the kitchen or a culinary master, if you will. But I appreciate the process. And I think there's a real creativity. I know there is. People who are chefs and who work in restaurants are incredible. And I have great respect for them. So my role in this was kind of just like idea wise and puns and how can we connect this storyline and translate to this. Julie kind of was able to, if I came up with a name for something, she was the one who could kind of bullet point by bullet point say, this is how you would make it. I wouldn't know that. So I'm not sure I'm really diving in. She kind of is the expert there, but I was happy to lend my ideas and creative insights and writing ability to make the intros really fun and witty, and the names of some of the things are really silly, and I'm proud of those that I came up with.
Now, this book, as well as your Wicked Late Show stuff, serves a good time capsule example of leaving something behind to look back on, take example with, or be inspired by. What does Brendan Kirby at the end of the day hope to leave behind for others to look back on, to judge upon his ability, but also use as examples to succeed further for other people?
Just a tidal wave of awkwardness. How about that?
I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I like to, this is going to sound so sappy. I just love making people laugh.
Sure.
I love doing things that I think are funny. I mean, not everyone's going to like you. I didn't get into this because I expected everyone to think I was the greatest thing. I just love sharing my sensibility. And if it connects with people, great. I want people to have a nice experience on the show. I want them to smile. I want them to chuckle. Like, let's get real, Nolan. I'm no great prophet or soothsayer, but I know that life can be very difficult and challenging. So if we could laugh a little bit, and if I could bring a little bit of levity to the world, even in my little corner over here, then that's all I want. I just want to make people laugh. And I love firing off a great line on the show. Will Gilbert, who's one of my co-hosts, Will has the greatest personality on the planet. He's the greatest laugher. And I love when I can make him laugh on the set. He's got and when we're rocking and rolling, and now with Audrey, and the energy in the room is palpable. And I know that it's me being authentic.
Sure.
I just want people to connect with it, have a laugh. And I want, when people think of me, I want them to think of, oh yeah, he's really entertaining. I get a kick out of him. I want them to think positive things. And I think that's kind of the thing that I want to leave. Just, other than the tidal wave of awkwardness, just an abyss of laugh, a tornado of entertainment. How about that?
There we go. Hey, both are equally as well. I probably prefer the first one, the wave of awkwardness, because that's I'm sure been the story of my life as
mine too.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Two peas in a pod. Before we end here today, I want to end on a little segment called the One Word Challenge. What entails in the One Word Challenge is me throwing a few names of people, places, or things that have some connection to my guest this week, being the legendary, amazing, prolific prophet being Brendan Kirby. He needs to do his best to say a word or two or sentence that best comes to mind when he hears it. So, Sir Brendan, are you ready?
Sir, it's Lord Kirby.
Oh, there you go.
Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, the Lord of East Bay, East Bay, Rhode Island.
What do I think of when I think of East Bay?
Yeah.
Great memories growing up. So much fun. Riding bikes with my friends, getting into trouble.
Rhode Island College.
Oh, great memories. Awesome education. Tremendous professors putting me on the path to success.
Will Gilbert.
A consummate professional, a great friend, awesome person.
Mike Montecalvo.
Awesome. Tremendously talented, a great supporter of mine, true professional, top notch.
Comedy.
Originality, laughter, fun.
Late night TV.
Awesome. Just a great place to be creative and to make people smile.
Success.
Money. No.
There we go.
No. Pride in your work.
Hard work.
Hard work. Something that can't be learned.
There we go. David
Either any
Letterman.
word is
David Letterman.
the best host of anything, anywhere. The best, the funniest, quickest, most original, most creative, and one of my biggest inspirations.
And last but never least, certainly in this cosmic universe we all call Earth that we live in, Brendan Kirby.
A total dork.
I don't know a total dork, but if that's your words, not mine.
A loser. No, I'm only kidding. Just someone who loves to make people laugh and have fun, and who appreciates creativity and kindness and respect and hard work, and will stop at nothing to get the job done in a way that he can be proud of and that other people can enjoy.
Never famished, always hungry, as they say. I guess if that works. I don't know if it works, but whatever. That'll be taken out when I edit this.
No, leave it all in, warts and all.
No, yes, I'll say this, and this is truthful, and I've learned not to say it constantly over and over again when I'm doing it, because that's another thing my dear mother says. Oh, you say that too much. I say this in the pantheon of experiences that I've had doing this podcast the last 2 years, and sure, it's never been perfect, or not always been perfect, I should say.
Other than tonight.
Of course, I'll say, which is what I'm getting to. I'll say this, sir. I appreciate your time taking to do this. Of course, there are so many better things to do than coming on my show, but I thank you for your originality, your patience, your professionalism in wanting to do this and coming on and spending a little over an hour with me.
It's my pleasure, and I'm such a multitasker. I've been getting a pedicure the whole time.
Oh, there you go.
It's a win-win. No, all kidding aside, Nolan, good luck to you, and I give you a lot of credit for doing this. I know what goes into producing your own thing like this, so I appreciate you asking me. I wish you a lot of luck moving forward, and let's stay in touch and keep up the good work, because you got something nice going on here, and you're very well researched, and I appreciate that very much.
Well, I appreciate it. And all those out there who enjoy this, because who the hell wouldn't? This is Brendan Kirby and Nolan Carr, of course. Do yourself a favor. Subscribe, like, comment, share, all that fun jazz. So you can blow up the like button, all the data, and all that stuff. So you can make me bigger than other people in society. Follow on Twitter, Nolan Carr Night, and Instagram, Nolan Carr Night Show, for all news, updates regarding the podcast. In the words of David Letterman, thank you and good night.